Hey, Tom McCarley's Advantage here. Thanks for coming to my webinar today. I'm going to go through a little simple case study. I'm going to walk through what goes into calculating a lease, what are the actual factors that are involved, and what are the different ways you can use that to your advantage to negotiate a better lease. I'm going to use an actual car, an actual example, and really break down the money and how the dealer will make it look like a price is a different price than it really is. But let's get started. So this is going to be a Mazda 3, and this is an actual car I'd help someone with. I'd help them figure out what they should actually be paying, and give them some tips on how to then negotiate it. And they ended up getting a car for a very fair and reasonable price. And these principles can be applied to really any car that you're negotiating. It's all the same at the end of the day. Dealers want to make it seem like it's not. They want to make it trickier than it is. It's really not. It's complicated, but it is straightforward. So let's start off with the summary of the factors that actually impact a lease payment. So a lot of people think about, just a little background, a lot of people think of a lease as like a rental, like you're renting the car from the dealership, but you're not. What actually happens is the bank buys the car from the dealer and then calculates a lease payment for you, which is agreed upon. So what are those factors that go into it? There's four main factors. When you're leasing a car, you're effectively financing the depreciation. So the factors that go into it are the MSRP. This is the manufacturer's suggested retail price. This is the price that you will see on the window sticker. So this is, it's a $35,000 car. You might negotiate a lower price, but $35,000, that's the MSRP. The sale price is what you actually negotiate. And most people immediately, red flag right here, start to think, but we're leasing. We're not talking about buying a car. But that's the thing. That is the biggest trick. The sale price of the car is what you actually negotiate to lower the price. It's the biggest lever you can pull. It's the biggest thing you have to your advantage. And really the dealer wants to hide that from you and get you thinking about monthly payment. The way you get your monthly payment lower is to lower your sale price. The money factor, you can think of it like the interest rate. It's the bank's charge, it's the rent charge. You'll hear it called a couple different things, but it's actually an interest rate divided by 2,400. I don't know why. There's a complicated finance formula. No one can really ever explain it, but that's all you need to know is that if you take your interest rate and divide by 2,400, that's your money factor. Someone gives you a money factor, multiply it times 2,400, that's your effective interest rate. A nice rule of thumb to think about is if you see more than 3 zeros on a money factor, that's good. That's really low. If you see 4 zeros, it's basically 0%. The residual is the value that the bank believes the car will be worth at the end of the lease. So this is usually expressed in a percentage. It's usually 60%, 50%. You'll sometimes see it expressed as a value. So they'll just do the math. So let's use, example of a $30,000 car, a 60% residual. What's 60% of 30,000? $18,000. That's your residual. It's usually also what the lease buyout is in the end. Basically the bank is saying at the end of this car is going to be worth $18,000. You can have it for that, or, we'll take it for that. In order to get the lowest lease payment possible, you want to think of these things as levers, things that can go up and down. You can move them around. The MSRP, you can't really change that at all. But if you're leasing an $80,000 car, it's probably going to be worth more. It's probably going to cost you more a month than a $20,000 car. You want to lower your sale price as much as possible. The bigger the discount, the lower it's going to be. And that's because the residual, which you want as high as possible, the residual is always based off of the MSRP. The sale price is then what you're actually basing the price of the car off. So the lower the sale price, the higher the residual, the better. And the money factor is just like any interest rate. You want it as low as possible. So think about that as you're trying to think of the different types of cars you could potentially lease. There's if you can have a low MSRP that will have a big discount off to get you a lower sale price with a low money factor and a really high residual. So the bank thinks it's going to be worth a lot in the end. They're not going to charge you a lot to finance it. Their dealership is going to be willing to drop the price down. It didn't start off too much anyway. That's going to be about as cheap as you can get. So the math for this, when you put them all together, it's a lease payment is based on a simple, straightforward formula. And it gets complicated because these numbers get obfuscated, they get confused, and the it's a shell game at the dealership of where number goes where. But if you break it down to its components, the monthly payment is the capitalized cost minus the residual divided by the number of months plus the capitalized cost plus the residual value times the money factor. And you're probably scratching your head saying, yeah, what? Um, just to go through it again real quick. The monthly payment is based on your first part of that formula, that next line, that's the cost of depreciation. Capitalized cost minus residual value divided by the number of months you have it. The next is your cost, your finance charge, your rent charge, your cost of money. It's the capitalized cost plus residual value times the money factor. Now, to clarify a little bit, so what goes into the capitalized cost? That's where it gets a little tricky. Let's remember those next the previous slide where we talked about the different factors. We'll talk about a couple additional fees, and I'll explain the cap cost and explain some confusion around there. So there are additional fees on a lease that can't be avoided, and these usually get hidden. Dealers make people feel like they got them for free a lot of times, but they're always paid one way or another. And anytime you see these lease deals that are like $99 a month, you read the fine print. It'll always say plus acquisition fee, plus tax, title, license, document fees, additional, actual MSRP may vary. There's all this fine print. Those ads aren't real. It's an easy way to say it. You're not going to get a car for $99 a month unless you're paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 out of pocket, or with a trade-in. So what are these different fees? There's the bank acquisition cost. You can't get around that. That exists on every lease. It's going to range. I've seen it as low as $350 when Subaru was discounting their acquisition costs, and I've seen it as high as over $1,000. You get higher end brands. Range Rover, Mercedes, they have high acquisition costs. It makes sense. They can, you're talking a $70,000, $80,000 lease, a couple more bucks on every month. People aren't going to notice. Generally, what you'll see, Toyota, Honda, Mazda, it's about $550 to $650 is the range you should expect for an acquisition fee. Sales tax, it's going to depend on your state. I've seen anything from 3% to upwards of 9, 10%. You have places, jurisdictions like Chicago, where they'll tack on a lease, basically a lease tax, where they charge extra. Places like Philadelphia, where different regions, Pennsylvania, where different regions of the state can have local taxes as well. So, the state tax is one thing, then you get a city tax and a local tax. You start getting 10, 11%. Then you get states like Texas that'll tax the entire value of the car. So most states usually tax the payment itself. If you're paying $100 a month and your tax is 6%, then your tax is $6 a month. But it really differs, and you really have to understand your local jurisdiction and how it can factor in. But in general, taxes are going to add $15 to $40 a month, if not higher. I've seen taxes for a BMW in Philadelphia was $85 a month for a $55,000 car. So you can really start to get taxes pretty high in some regions, and you just have to be aware. Title and license fees. This is what the state charges you to get the car on the road. $50 to $250 general range that you see. Again, you're not getting out of paying the state. Dealer document fees. These can be negotiated sometimes. Dealers are less likely to do it, and usually if they negotiate, if they drop the document fee, they're going to add something else on anywhere. They got to make their money some way. It's really common. Some states it's capped at $75. I've seen doc fees as low as $50. I've seen them, as high as $1,000. Florida has really high document fees. Massachusetts, where I'm making this right now, anywhere from usually $350 to $450 is pretty much the norm on an economy car. And some dealerships will have add-ons. So, the MSRP of the car is $20,000, but every single car on our lot has an alarm. So it's actually $20,400. So you want to make sure what you're actually buying and the actual car that you're getting is what you want and what you're paying for. And, if a dealer doesn't want to budge on the VIN etching that they put on the window, then find one who's not going to charge you for that. You don't want to be leasing or financing wheel locks for 3 years when it's something that you don't actually want. And then there's other variable fees per state regulation. You have tire disposal fees. It really depends on what the regulations in the different regions are. So it brings us into final capitalized costs. We mentioned that formula before, where the formula is cap cost minus residual value divided by the number of months. The capitalized cost is the vehicle negotiated sale price plus all those required fees and charges. So if we go back, all these different fees, add them into whatever you actually negotiate the sale price of the car, and the final payment is based on this cap cost. So it's why the sale price is so important. It's the only part of this formula that you can go back to. If we go back here, capitalized cost is made up of a bunch of fees you can't get around, plus the sale price. You can move the sale price. Dealers often lower the monthly payment. They'll ask for a down payment. They'll call it a cap cost reduction. You hear that term all the time. They use the term that people aren't familiar with. They say, "Oh, it was just a cap. It wasn't a down payment. It was a cap cost reduction. I had to give $1,000 towards cap cost." They don't know what they're saying or what they're talking about, and that's intentional. The more confusing it can be, the more likely you are just to write a check. So it gives the appearance of a really low monthly payment, but in reality, you're just fronting money, and you want to avoid that as much as possible. The reason you want to avoid that is because if you write a check for a $2,000 down payment, a cap cost reduction, you drive off the lot and the car gets totaled, you don't own that car. The insurance company gives money to the bank, and you never see that $2,000 again. So there's no discount that's being involved when you're putting money down, when you're reducing the cap cost. You're just fronting money to get a lower payment. And really, the general recommendation is you should probably hang on to your money and have a slightly higher payment. But you can weigh that at the time. So any prices that I use in this are going to assume a $0 down payment at signing, unless I say otherwise. So let's look at this Mazda 3. This is a base model. This is a car I helped somebody with. The MSRP was $22,645. And he looked around and found some information. He checked out TrueCar, checked out Edmunds. Check out all the different pricing sites. Talk to a couple of different dealers, see if you can get some quotes. Found out a reasonable target sale price, $20,380, $80.50, 10% off. So, is that an aggressive price? Probably. When you start talking these $22,000, $23,000 cars, there's only so much room you can go. There's only so much of a discount you can have. Taking $2,000 off a $60,000 car, a lot different than taking $2,000 off a $22,645 car. So it really depends on what's going on in your region. Again, sources like Edmunds and TrueCar will give you a good sense of what the actual, reasonable price you should pay at the dealership. The money factor on this, from experience and from some dealer relationships, that I knew that it was 0.0001, which is effectively 0%. We talked earlier about multiplying that money factor times 2,400 to get the interest rate. The interest rate is 0.024%, basically zero. It's going to be a finance charge of under $1 a month. And why would they do this? The reason they do it is because of the next line. The residual value is only 54%. That's not very high. So the residual value of this car is $22,645 times 54%, which is just over $12,000. You'll see a residual value on cars like Hondas with a higher resale value. I'm saying residual value is basically resale value. So you'll see Hondas 60, 62%. You'll see Toyotas 70, Tacomas, 4Runners. These cars get into the 70s and 80%. That's on the extreme high end, but a good strong residual is right around 60%. 50% is pretty bad. 54 right in the middle. It also depends on how many miles per year you want. People talk a lot about thinking that miles are purchased, or you pay 10 cents up front. Really what happens is that if you want less miles, the residual goes up. So if we go back to that formula, the residual value going up will lower the price in this math. You want less miles, This is for 12,000 miles. If you want 10,000 miles, would have been 55%. If you want 15,000 miles, goes in the other direction. So that's how when we talk about what are the different, how do you buy miles up front or what they're worth, it's really just a manipulation of the residual value. The approximate total fees I'm using Massachusetts as an example, $400 to the dealer, $170 to the state, $650 for the acquisition fee. That I call that the bank fee. There are $1,220 in fees on this. So our final cap cost is that we're aiming for is the negotiated sale price. It's $20,380.50 plus the approximate total fees. So the final cap cost is going to be $21,600.50, and we're going to look at a sales tax of 6.25%. So how does that math come out? It comes out to actually $277 a month with making just your first payment at signing. So no down payment, no cap cost reduction. And right here, line by line, I just do the math. So cap cost, $21,600 minus that residual value, $12,228.30, divided by 36, plus 21,000 plus 12,200 times 0.001. So we just plug these numbers directly into this, just little algebra, little substitution, and we get our monthly payment. Comes down to the first part is $9,372 divided by 36. That comes out to $260.34. That's our depreciation charge. The finance charge, the other half of that, comes out to 34 cents. Again, this is basically 0% interest on this particular Mazda. So our monthly payment comes out to $260.68. And how we calculate tax in Massachusetts is take 6.25% of that, it's another $16, add it up, $276.68. And so people see this a lot and they say it's ridiculous. Leases, it's a $22,000 car. It should be $150 a month. My buddy's leasing it for $100 a month. They're not. They might be, but there is no free money. And so how do you end up with these crazy low monthly payments? It's just put some money down, and this is what the dealer wants you to do. And a lot of times, again, this gets obfuscated. You come in with an older Honda, and you think it's worth $500 because it needs a bunch of work on it, and they're going to put on their lot for $5,000. So they give you $2,000 for it, and they fix it up and put it on their lot. You don't even realize that $2,000 is basically a down payment. And then they say, oh, hey, you got to pay some fees out of pocket. So we're just going to have you, just need another $1,800 down. And what you're actually doing is basically fronting $4,000 without realizing it. So if you look at this kind of breakdown here, $1,000 down would bring the monthly payment down to $247, and you'd pay that plus the first month's payment, so $1,000 plus $247 at signing. And you would walk out of there saying, I'm under $250 a month. I only paid $1,200, not a big deal. $2,000 down brings it down to $217 a month. $3,000 down, that's where you get into to $187 a month. And where it starts to get really tricky is, all right, well, the fees are $1,220. We talked about that: the bank fee, the registration fee, the dealer fee. So let's have you, pay your fees up front, and just paying those, that would get your payment down to about $261 a month. But if you actually start to do $3,000 down plus paying your fees, you're at $4,200 a month out of pocket. You're really starting to look at $150, $140 a month. So you get these crazy prices because people pay more money up front than they should. And again, there's a risk in that. You drive off the lot, you get rear-ended, car gets totaled, it's done. It's gone forever. And also, why wouldn't you want to hang on to that $3,000 and keep it in your pocket? Again, you're not getting a discount. They're just moving money around for you. This is a great example. Let's look at a couple different ads. I just Googled for Mazda deals. Look at this one on the left: lease for $159 a month. People focus on $159 a month, and you'll see right there the MSRP $22,510, sale price $20,562. It's about 10% off. They're giving a good discount. But what they're doing is they're just making it sound a lot better than it is. $3,200 down. So let's go back to $3,000 down. I did the clear math right there. $187 a month. The fine print is what they're not showing you here. those $1,200 in fees that you're going to pay, you get to $159 a month just because you're paying $4,500 up front out of pocket. So the equivalent, this is probably equivalent to, if you do the math backwards, to about $310 a month, when really you should be at, you think at apples to apples, what does this cost with no money down? Another example that you see all the time, Mazda has a lot of, and I'm not picking on Mazda, I'm just using it as an example. It's very clear to show they have really good loyalty offers, really good affiliate offers, really good college grad program, really good military offer. Right there, that's $2,250 in discounts. Unless you're, a ROTC senior in college with currently driving a Mazda who's been referred by somebody, you're not getting all those discounts. And on a lease, a rule of thumb is that every $1,000 down is $30 a month. When you start talking $2,250 in discounts, that's $75 a month that's going to knock off your payment. So they'll throw out these crazy payments, these crazy, things that are not going to be attainable for anybody. And it gets really misleading. And, again, it's all sorts of fine print, hidden fees. So what can you do? What can you do with this information? So again, I like to take a look at all the different pieces, and this is how I kind of analyze the lease, so to speak, and think like, is this a good deal? What is this? How do we compare apples to apples on this? So the sale price is the most critical factor to reducing the monthly payment. If in the example that I used, 10% off, we're at $277 a month. If you could only negotiate 5% off, it'd be about $310 a month. If you could negotiate 15% off, you're down to $240. So getting that additional, $500 off, that's $15 a month. Another $500, another $15 a month. You can negotiate another $1,000 off, $30 a month you're saving. It really starts to add up if you know where to negotiate. Other discounts and down payments can lower the price, but you're still paying either way. So, I mentioned before on the previous slide that $750 loyalty, the $500 military. Let's say you could use the loyalty, and we're talking about the $277 example that I gave. It's going to drop it down to $255 with 10% off. If you could do loyalty plus military, then we're down to $240. If you had a $2,500 trade, and this is where it gets confusing for a lot of people, because you drive in with a car that, it might be a decent car, but you're looking at it saying it needs $3,000 worth of work. Like, just let them have it. Just let them have it, like give them the car. But there's value there. There's actual money there. So you think you walk into the dealership with, your old Mazda and you get a little bit of a discount and you walk out saying, I'm paying $166 a month. I didn't put any money down, but you did. You gave them $2,500 for a trade. And there was, some cash loyalty bonus that was applied to it as well that wouldn't be there for somebody else. So really, you want to be able to keep these numbers separate, know which pieces you're negotiating, and then pull it all together to really understand what you're truly paying. The money factor, when you look at this, it's phenomenal. It's basically 0%. And that makes up for kind of a lower residual value, right? Those things balance each other out. Again, when you compare it to other brands, Mazda in this instance is trying to make their lease competitive. They're trying to make it, similar monthly, back out to a similar monthly price as Honda or Toyota, which are going to have higher residuals and higher money factors. So you'll see about a common on a Civic, 60% residual, 2% interest rate equivalent. Common on a Tacoma, 75% residual, 5% interest rate equivalent on the money factor. So the manufacturers move those numbers around so that the number ends up equivalent and competitive in the end. The conclusion is, this is a decent lease. It's a low price car. It's got a great money factor. You're not paying any interest fees. So my client who I was helping with this, I recommended that if he could go get this for around $275 a month, it's a great deal, and he should be happy with that. And if he wanted to get a lower payment, he should understand the risks and the trade-offs, that you can pay some fees out of pocket, you can pay some money out of pocket, but you're not getting any free money, and there are risks with it. Other considerations, gap insurance. If the car is totaled, but you owe more on it than the insurance will pay, you're responsible for that. The insurance protects the bank. It doesn't protect you. So you want to make sure that, you don't end up getting your car totaled and then get a bill for $4,000 because you just started the lease. You'll always be underwater on a lease for, usually 2/3 of it, even more. Mazda used to offer gap insurance all the time. They don't on all their leases. It's something that a dealership will charge for. It can be anywhere from $300 to $900. Some brands like Honda include it. You really want to make sure you ask, is gap insurance included? You want to understand your terms and your paperwork. Maybe do some Googling and confirm. And you can always ask your bank. You can ask, your insurance company. You can ask them if they'll do a gap insurance policy, and a lot of them will. There are many automotive insurance companies that will just add it on as a premium for you, and that can be cheaper than buying it. I helped someone recently who took the gap insurance at the dealership. He knew it was refundable for 30 days, and he shopped around, found a better deal, canceled it. So it was rolled into his monthly payment, and it was taken off. Mazda specifically often waives the first month's payment as an additional incentive. So the fun part about this, you go and you negotiate down to $277, and then you only actually make 35 payments. You don't write a check at signing. Not all brands do that. And Mazda doesn't do it all the time. It's a special that they're running. It seems to be running it all the time. But really, it's just they're not taking the money away. If you would spread the amount over 36 months, you'd pay slightly less. So it's the same amount that you're paying based on that formula over the course of the lease, no matter what. But it's just a nice little incentive to be able to get a true zero down, zero payment, zero due at signing lease. In general, though, you should expect to pay your first month's payment at signing. It's not a down payment. That's you just want to make sure you're making 36 payments of that same amount. So then how do you negotiate? I always tell people, flip the negotiations on their heads. You set the terms on which you're willing to lease. You've done your research. You found realistic numbers. You did the math. You understand it. You're also the one with money. You don't have to sit around and ask the dealer for offers. You can make offers to the dealer, and you can say, hey, I think this is a reasonable price. Here's how I arrived at it. I'm not coming in to negotiate. I'm not budging on the terms. I'm not going to, go into the finance department and sign for undercoating. And, I know someone who leased a car for 3 years and got tricked into buying a 100,000 mile tire protection policy for like $800. And that added, $20 to $25 a month to their payment for, a car with 50,000 mile tires for a 30,000 mile lease. So you want to avoid any sort of those tricks. And you just want to tell the dealer straight up, if you can come in, if you can do it at this price, I'm willing to come in. And sometimes the first one says yes. Sometimes you get to hit up a few of them. I've built enough relationships, or I don't have to waste time with the ones that aren't, going to be reasonable. But I think that the key here is, having a realistic, reasonable sale price that you've done research on and is doable. Finding out if you have to ask the dealer the money factor, ask them the residual, finding out what those actual numbers are, doing the math, coming up with the payment on your own, and saying, hey, listen, these are the terms I'm willing to come in and buy it for. And just remember, you are the one with the ability to move a $30,000 product off their lot. They're the ones who need to move a car. You have choices. You don't have to ask for offers. Make some offers. Tell them what you're willing to do it on. Again, the key is be realistic. I want this car for $100 a month. Don't do that. But if you go through, find out realistic prices, are true to the math, more often than not, someone's going to take the deal. I have a form letter I use. I have a really, really high success rate when I use it. Email me. I'll share it with you. Folks who use it, again, it just lays out, these are the terms I'm willing to lease the car on. Bring it to your manager. You want to do it? We got a deal. I'll come in today and sign. Be serious. I always tell people this: don't pull the tricks that you talk about hating, that you think you're frustrated with. You hate when a dealer pulls a bait and switch. don't say, hey, I'll lease this based on 300 a month with zero down, and when they say yes, say actually 290. Be straightforward, be fair, be reasonable, and when you go to sign, stick to your guns. Don't buy anything you don't need, and understand the key with all this is that you understand what you got. So I appreciate anyone who's stayed this far. I thank you for attending. If you want to set some time to chat one-on-one, I offer time. You can pick my brain. I can help line you up with the deal. I can introduce you to dealers who are willing to be straightforward. Information's here. Just reach out. I'd love to chat. Thanks.